to graduate school to become an economist, I think the last thing I ever expected to come from that would be that I'd end up with a pimp as a mentor. See, it all started a couple years ago when I went to the Moonlight Bunny Ranch, the famous brothel just outside Reno, Nevada. I went there to do a story on negotiation skills because it turns out the brothel actually offers negotiation training because there's no set prices. The women there negotiate every transaction. Now, going in, I was terrible at negotiating. That's what drew me to this story. Whenever I'd have to negotiate for a new job, it filled me with so much anxiety because I would think if I asked for too much, my boss would think I'm pushy or aggressive, or maybe just looking for the job that will actually pay me what I want. But mostly, I think most of my anxiety was that I just had this fear of hearing no. Every time someone said no to me, it felt like this little micro rejection. And then I'd somehow even feel guilty that I put this other person in a position where they had to say no to me. I just couldn't fathom how a good relationship could start with a no. And so in the past, I'd deal with this risk the way a lot of people do, which is if I took a job, I'd just take whatever they offered me. I'd read all those magazine articles that said that's not what you're supposed to do. So it turns out a brothel is a great place to learn how to negotiate. Because, think about it. The women there negotiate and then do something like way more intimate than I ever will do with my coworkers. So, given my fear of hearing no, you can imagine my surprise that the women kept saying the same thing. Saying, Dennis says it takes 6 no's to get to a yes. 6 no's. I hear no once and I want to crawl into a hole. So I asked this Dennis, the brothel owner, Dennis Hoff, the late great Dennis Hoff. Dennis liked to describe himself as America's most successful pimp. But he also was probably the world's best life coach. Because we sat down and we got to the bottom of my issue with no. I was like, how can a relationship thrive if it starts with a no? He's like, it can. But then he said something that changed my life. He said, if you're not hearing no regularly, you're not asking for enough. Now, there's a certain irony to all of this because I'm an economist who studies retirement finance, and that is effectively the study of risk. Because planning for retirement is risky. You have to make a decision. We don't know how long you're going to live or what's going to happen to the stock market. And I have read all the important papers, and I have worked with the best, most eminent economists in my field. But it was actually this guy who really drove the point home of what risk is about. Because you take a risk for more. Like you invest in stocks instead of bonds because you're hoping you'll get a higher payout even if you risk losing money. You might work for a startup instead of the government because it could be the next Google. Anyway, there's a better chance you might just lose money. So I've spent my whole career studying risk, how to manage it, how to identify it. But when Dennis told me why hearing no was so important, a light really went on for me because I realized anyway I was studying risk, my fear of no was keeping me from taking any sort of meaningful risk in my life. And I don't just mean negotiating. I mean, in my personal life and my career, I wasn't getting any of the things I wanted because I had this paralyzing fear of no. And I guess in some ways that's not totally surprising because even if you're a risk scholar like me, you get a lot of mixed messages about taking risks. You're told if something's risky, you shouldn't do it. We often portray risk takers as these reckless, irresponsible people. But really, risk taking is a super critical life skill. You're not going to get anything of value in life if you don't take risks. You're never going to have a meaningful relationship or intimacy unless you risk rejection. You're never going to thrive at work unless sometimes you raise your hand to do a task you might fail at. And I want to be clear here. It's not one of these talks where I'm telling you, go out and fail and take whatever risk comes your way. No. What I know from my research is there's a real science to risk taking. And it's not a matter of black and white, take risks or don't, be a risk taker or not. There's a huge gray area. And that is the field of risk management. And that really comes down to 2 different things. It's one, choose the right risks. Don't just take every risk that comes your way. And that is, one's so simple and so hard, is you have to know exactly what you want. Because you take a risk to get upside. But that upside better be something that actually means something to you as what you want. So if you're, say, renegotiating your salary, that might feel like a risk, but be clear if that's really what you want. Do you really want more money? Maybe you want more work-life balance. Maybe you're just looking for more recognition. Being clear on what you want in negotiation increases the odds it will go well. Even if you're thinking about jumping out of an airplane, be clear on what you're hoping to achieve there. Maybe it's a rush of adrenaline. Maybe that's enough for you. Maybe it's some sense of achievement. And once you're clear on the risks you want to take, next is risk management. And that involves taking just the amount right of risk and no more. Because risking downside is the cost of getting more, but there's really no need to overpay. So I was surprised when I was in the brothel to learn that the women gave up 50% of those hard negotiating earnings to dentists. And I was like, 50% sounds like a lot. Why don't you just work on your own and keep all that money? And they're like, no, that's just too risky. Because if I work on my own, I have to work illegally. And I risk all sorts of things, like violence and arrest. I'd rather give up 50% of my earnings and know I'm safe. Now, that still sounded like a lot to me. But it's hard to get that risk-reward balance just right. And after my time in the brothel, I thought, well, gee, maybe I also have a lot more to learn here, and I should take more risks. So I developed this whole new life philosophy that I should be hearing more no's than yeses. I actually, because I'm an economist, put a number on it. It's like, I should be hearing no 60% of the time, and that's how I know I am pushing it and taking enough risk. And then I decided to travel the country and meet risk takers in all different fields to see how they think of risk management. And to start, a lot of these people said, I don't want to talk to you. Because I don't know who people don't want to talk to more, an economist or a journalist, and I'm both. And every time they said no, it still really stung a little. Then I'll take a deep breath, and I'm like, it's okay, because they said no, and that just means you asked for enough. And then I'd ask again, or I'd ask for something a little different, and I started to get a lot better at asking, and eventually people started saying yes, and I developed all this upside. I learned more about risk management than I ever would have staying at home and looking at data. And I met all these extraordinary people. I met army generals, and I met horse breeders and criminals, and even big wave surfers when I went to their annual risk conference. Yeah, like, believe it or not, big wave surfers, that guy goes to an annual risk conference. Just like pension actuaries and the rest of us, he also sits in windowless conference rooms looking at PowerPoint slides. Although, as you can see, look how informal the dress code is. There's not a closed-toed shoe in this room. So you probably don't look at this guy on a wave and think, that's a prudent risk taker. But actually, there's more to it than when you see on TV. Like when you see big wave surfers on TV, they're always like, yeah, man, if a wave's there, I just gotta surf it. But that's not actually what's going on here. For example, big waves travel in sets, say 5 big waves, one after another. And that first wave might be that big, ultimate, perfect wave, but a prudent surfer will not take that wave, because if he wipes out, then 4 big waves are going to be barreling on him, and he has a higher risk of drowning. He'll wait for the 4th or 5th wave. It might be a little smaller, it might be less perfect, but it's a lot safer. This is actually what we call in financial economics hedging. It's giving up upside in exchange for reducing downside risk. It's less risk, but you still get stuff. This is also at play, it turns out, in brothel negotiations. The women don't just come out and ask for tens of thousands of dollars. They hedge a bit. They'll usually offer a menu of, say, services that they're willing to provide, all at different price points. And this reduces the odds a customer will get offended and just walk out. Now, obviously, surfing a big wave like this is never a safe thing to do. You can't make it risk-free. And some brothel negotiations fail. Dennis actually told me that having failed negotiations is just as important as having successful ones. Because just like if no one ever has broken your heart, if you've never lost money in markets, you've never failed at a job, or you've never wiped out in a wave if you surf, or if negotiations haven't gone your way, if none of those things have happened to you, you're not taking enough risk. But the risk takers I met, they're okay with that, because they take risks often, and taking risks regularly means you get better at it. You pick the right risks and you take enough risk, and your risks will go well more frequently. But even still, sometimes you just gotta hear no. You have to hear no, because that's how you know you're taking enough risk.